What's up, everybody? It is Parker Hurley with the Chicago Bears pod with Parker Hurley. Check out everything I do at beargoggleson.com. Follow me at Parker Hurley on Twitter and follow us at beargoggleson.com. We're bringing you Chicago Bears news, debates, topics, everything like that every Tuesday and Thursday, 6 o'clock to 6:30 Eastern, 5 o'clock to 5:30 Central. Tune in every week. We're bringing it to you, and right now we're in the middle of March, so it's draft season. As everybody knows, free agency's completely wrapped up. We got our man I am Skokes here. Bear down his comment. Like I said, everybody leave a comment. You guys dictate the chat more than I do. We're going to be talking NFL draft, and I have a few things that we're going to hopefully get through as we get through this thing. But every comment you guys leave, we're going to react to it. We're going to decide what exactly we're going to talk about based on what's in the comments. So definitely everybody and hit like, follow, share, subscribe, and everything like that. And like I said, we'll be here for the next 30 minutes or so talking Chicago Bears, and they're at the owners meetings. Really, in my opinion, Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles both spoke at the owners meetings. The vibe I took away from the owners meetings big time is the Chicago Bears with the 9th overall pick are probably drafting a left tackle. It just seemed like it completely. And the biggest news that I think you could take away from it was Matt Eberflus was actually pretty directly what he thought about Braxton Jones. Do you think Braxton Jones is your left tackle of the future? Or do you think he could potentially move over to right tackle if they draft somebody in the top 10? And Eberflus put it pretty clearly. He said, we think, Braxton Jones could play on the left side or the right side. We're still looking to get the best 5 out there. We have no issues moving Braxton Jones whatsoever right now. And to me, like I said, that just screams that they're saying that because they could have very easily said Braxton Jones had a great rookie season. We're looking forward to what he can do at left tackle. We think he took big time steps, and we think he can take those steps forward into next season. He could have easily said a bunch of things like that, but he said no. He said, well, he said, well, this is a 5th round pick, who had his ups and downs, and the ups are good enough to where we think he could start on either side, and we like the idea that maybe he's a starter. But if we find a better left tackle, then he's not our future at left tackle, and we could potentially move on from that. That was the biggest takeaway that I took from both Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus talking, was Eberflus just so clearly, not sticking with Braxton Jones at left tackle, and so clearly saying that we could move him to right tackle. Because when you think about it, if you don't know what you're going to do in the NFL draft, and if you're saying, oh, they're not going to take one at 9, maybe they'll wait for, sure, they're going to draft a tackle, but maybe they'll wait for one at 54. But at 54, there's so many variables, and there's so much changing, and there's so many things that could just completely deconstruct the draft board, and you could sit there and you have someone pinned at 54 and then they go at 26 or something. It's so unpredictable, and it's so, you can't just say, oh, well, we may draft a tackle at 54, and if we do, then we'll move Braxton Jones to the right side. No, you're sitting there saying, if we draft someone at number 9 overall, will we move him to this side? Because we know the top 2 picks are probably going to be quarterbacks. We know the Colts might go quarterback. We know, just based on the board, when you kind of look at it, and even when you look at the Cardinals could go a tackle, but even at 3, a lot of people are saying, well, Will Anderson, the best defensive player, and we're going to kind of get into it a little later with a potential look at how the top 8 picks may fall for the Chicago Bears. So we're definitely going to get into that. But when you look at it and you say, okay, so the Colts, they actually have a left tackle. You look at it with the Seahawks, they drafted a couple left tackles recently. You look at it with the Falcons at 8, they drafted some left tackles recently. The Raiders have Colton Miller at left tackle. You just start looking at it and you keep saying, the Chicago Bears at number 9 will probably draft the first tackle. So it's really whichever one they want to go with. So we got our guy, I am Skokes. He said, he's stuck on Paris Johnson, but the more he thinks they might trade down. And that's true. And that is something that I'm going to get into with the way that there are ways that this mock draft could potentially break that. Like I just said, there's almost a lock when you, like I keep saying, you look at it and you say, the Lions have a left tackle. The Falcons have a left tackle. The Raiders have a left tackle. The Colts, it's Bernard Raymond. It's a 3rd round pick, but where they are, they have so many more needs that it's not left tackle. You look at it and you say, who, if a tackle doesn't go to the Cardinals at 3, who else is going to take a tackle between 4 and 8? There's not a single team out there. So the Chicago Bears are kicking off the tackle, thing with, who is it going to be there? And like you said, maybe they trade down because you're sitting there at 9 and you say, there's Skoronski, there's Braxton, or there's Broderick Jones, and then there's Paris Johnson. Maybe we do trade down a few spots, and it's not like it's going to go 9, 10, 11 is going to go tackle, tackle, tackle. You would assume not. Jalen Carter would potentially still be on the board, players of that nature. So you look at it and you say potentially they do that. And next comment from I Am Skokes. Like I keep saying, leave some comments because that dictates exactly where we're going with the conversation here. We're talking NFL draft. We're talking Matt Eberflus's comments at the NFL owners meetings, and we're talking Chicago Bears and mainly what they're going to do with the number 9 overall pick. And he says that he has past experience on the right side and Braxton does not. That's definitely true. The one I guess you would say is that it is true, but it's also he played mainly at right guard. The other thing that I would say is that and that is true, but Braxton Jones, when he went into training camp last season, he was actually getting work at right tackle because they didn't draft him, in like the 5th round, and they said, oh, this is our left tackle of the future. They drafted him and said, this is our swing tackle, basically. And because, first off, they actually had Larry Borum there, they had Tevin Jenkins there, they had, a bunch of guys there, competing for the tackle spot, and they had Braxton Jones was at right tackle, he was at left tackle, and just the way that it shook out. But I think when you're a 5th round pick like Braxton Jones, you kind of understand that maybe your position, it would take a few years for you to earn that status of you're the franchise left tackle. And while Paris Jones has that experience on the right side, what you looked at what he did on the left side, and it really is true that it's not becoming as much of a difference as Lane Johnson went 4th overall and he's a right tackle and he's probably going to go to the Hall of Fame, and the Eagles win all the time because Lane Johnson's starting a right tackle. But there is still something to that blind side, that the high upside of the left tackle. And you saw Orlando Brown, wouldn't play right tackle because he thought there was more money on the market for a left tackle. There's still just more value in the left tackle. And when you look at a top 10 pick, a player who could, be that franchise changer, and you say, well, Braxton Jones could be a good tackle, this, that, the other. But if Paris Johnson could be a franchise changing left tackle, you say, is the difference of, well, Paris Johnson has some experience on the right side. He could just, switch over there versus, well, Braxton Jones went to training camp. He has experience in college. Braxton Jones, took, only, a couple of days of practice in training camp, but Paris Johnson was, or Braxton Jones was in training camp, taking a few snaps on the right side. And one thing that I said is that, if Matt Eberflus publicly came out and he said, at the owners' meetings, Matt Eberflus comes out and says, well, we think Braxton Jones could play left or right. We haven't nailed down, his position yet. We're still looking at the best 5. Even after he showed last season, started 17 games, didn't miss a snap, I'm pretty sure. And, he gave up his sacks. We'll all remember Montez Sweat in the Washington game, just plowing him over and things like that. But, Eberflus, he didn't say, like I said, he didn't throw him under the bus, but he didn't stand by him and say, this is our left tackle. He said, we could potentially move him to the right side. We feel comfortable about moving him to the right side. So if you're going to, in terms of going out and saying that, I think it opens up the idea of there is still a hole on our left tackle, and there is still that upside and that potential of that we could fill with a guy like Paris Johnson. And the Paris Johnson, like I was actually, to finish that thought, was if you say that at the owners' meetings, probably a week or 2 ago, you probably texted Braxton Jones and told him the exact same thing. And so you thought, like, you maybe at the Ohio State Pro Day, just a week ago, you left the Ohio State Pro Day. You said, wow, Braxton Jones showed us everything we needed from a left tackle. He checked box after box after box. We met with him. We had a conversation with him the night prior. We went out to dinner with him. We feel really comfortable with him. We're all in on Braxton Jones. Let's text Braxton, or we're all in on Paris Johnson. Let's text Braxton tonight and say, hey, if the board breaks the way it's going to break, we just want you to know, we want to be completely upfront and we want you to be completely honest. And, today, that was what, like March 20th. On March 20th, we want you to maybe start taking some right tackle reps. And to say it, today on March 28th, to me, that says that he obviously had said that to Braxton Jones, weeks ago, months ago, whatever. He said that, you think, hey, Braxton, we think that you could play right tackle. So he thinks so. And I am Skokes. He says that's what he loves about Braxton Jones is the versatile athleticism. Need the best five out there wherever it is. And that is when you look at it and you say, okay, and that is the reality is that if you say that Paris Johnson could be that, a lot of people have compared him to Andrew Thomas from the Giants because of his length. And Andrew Thomas was somebody who played on the left and right side. And a lot of people said, well, do you move Andrew Thomas to the right side? But they said, no, the upside of having that franchise left tackle is so valuable that, and we think, like I said, we think Braxton Jones could be good at either one. We don't think he's going to be bad at either one, but we don't think he's going to be elite at either one. We just think he's going to be good at either one versus we think Paris Johnson could be an elite left tackle. You'd rather have the elite left tackle and the good right tackle versus, good on both, basically is how you would have to look at it in that situation. And that is, like I said, everything that Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus has done so far has been like, it shows me that they're both honest and open people to this point. And Ryan Poles, I keep saying, took a lot of flack because he walked away from the combine and said, we think we can trade outside the top five. We think we can get multiple first rounders, and we think we can fill a need in free agency with a player that we're going to get back. And everyone said, why is Ryan Poles saying this? That's crazy that Ryan Poles is being so blunt and transparent. And then he got all those things that he said that he was going to get back. So when Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles come out and say things like, we think Braxton Jones could be a right tackle, I take it as they've already talked to Braxton Jones. They've been honest about where they stand with Braxton Jones. And they told him probably, like I said, maybe at the Northwestern Pro Day or at the Georgia Pro Day, or maybe the day they traded back to 9, they said, we weren't going to take a tackle at number 1 or even, 2 or whatever. But now that we're traded back to number 9, we just want you to know that there's a chance that you're going to have to move to right tackle if the board breaks the way it does. And like you said earlier, Skokes, is that what if there's a chance that they're sitting there at 9? And one of the things we're going to talk about is the board breaks perfectly. And the odds of a tackle going in the top 9, unless somebody trades ahead of the Bears, knowing the Bears are going to start the things off with it, the odds of a tackle going top 9 are so low. So the Chicago Bears could be sitting there at 9 saying, we have 3 tackles. Not only that, they could be saying, this player, that player, the other. Like I talked about, and I think that can just break us into, let's just get into like a sort of mock draft, the possibilities of how this top 8 is going to go for the Chicago Bears and what type of possibilities they could have sitting there at number 9. So if you guys are tuning in, it's Parker Hurley. Follow me on Twitter. Follow us at beargoggleson.com. Check out everything we're writing over there. We're talking Chicago Bears draft, and we're about to talk about the top 8 and how the top 8 should really break pretty well for the Chicago Bears, to the point where if they want to take a guy that they're really high on, they can, but they could very easily trade back and feel pretty comfortable about that. So you look at the number 1 pick's going to be a quarterback, obviously. We know that. Whether it's Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and then really when you kind of break it down at this point, you think the Houston Texans are probably going to take Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. And, the thing that everyone keeps saying, oh, but what about Anthony Richardson? Anthony Richardson is a dark horse for the number 1 overall pick. I think if you're a team drafting Anthony Richardson, you have to have a plan for what's going to happen in the first year of Anthony Richardson, because like Trey Lance, like when the 49ers traded up for Trey Lance, and obviously it hasn't worked out the way they wanted to, or when the Chiefs traded up for Patrick Mahomes and they knew he was going to sit a year, a guy like Alex Smith, a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't think you can draft Anthony Richardson if you don't have a guy like that. And the Panthers, they do have Andy Dalton. You could definitely argue that, but the way that they're setting up their core in terms of veterans is they want to put a rookie in there. So they take Stroud or Young. And when you look at the Texans, yeah, they have Case Keenum. Yeah, they even have Davis Mills, but the coach that drafted Davis Mills is completely gone. I would think that they draft a quarterback like Bryce Young or Stroud, and they trade Davis Mills, and then they have Case Keenum probably with Bryce Young, CJ Stroud with Andy Dalton in the top 2. 3, you look at it with the Arizona Cardinals. One of the more interesting things that I've been thinking with them is that they've been linked to Christian Gonzalez, and everyone's saying obviously that they're probably going to trade down. And the reality that I look at it is, if you're the Colts at 4, they're flirting about that. Oh, we're not going to take a quarterback. We don't even need to take a quarterback. Saying, hey, don't trade in front of us. You don't need to worry about trading in front of us. But if the top two go and Anthony Richardson's the top guy on the board, the team that makes the most sense for trading up is to 7, from 7 to 3, is the Las Vegas Raiders. Because, like I just said, if you're going to draft Anthony Richardson, you have to have a plan that, like, the odds of him starting next year seem to be low, in my opinion. Or it seems to be like, if you're starting him next year, then things are going to be like hectic, or like struggles and things like that. And it's going to be rocky. And that's why I just don't think a team sign, I think you sign Andy Dalton because, if things break horribly, we have Andy Dalton. Case Keenum. If things break horribly, we have Case Keenum. And those two have basically, Dalton's been a starter for a while, but Dalton was with Justin Fields. Case Keenum's been a backup for a long list of quarterbacks. I think you don't draft, if you have versus Case Keenum and Andy Dalton versus Jimmy Garoppolo, who, has won playoff games, took the 49ers to the playoffs, knows the Josh McDaniels scheme, and he gives you the fact that unless he gets hurt, he's going to be able to start the full season, and there's not going to be calls for, you got to bench Case Keenum. We got to see what we have in Anthony Richardson. And then Anthony Richardson isn't ready, and then it looks like a complete mess. And then, especially if you're the Houston Texans and optics aren't going your way anyways, I don't think they can draft Anthony Richardson. I think the Raiders, because they have Garoppolo and they have McDaniels, I think that they're the team that most likely is going to draft Anthony Richardson. And you think about Josh McDaniels, you say, the last time he was an NFL head coach, he drafted Tim Tebow. Does he learn from his mistakes, this, that, the other? I think a guy like Josh McDaniels is saying, oh, well, if I didn't get fired, if they let me actually execute my plan, this, that, the other, it would have worked out with Tim Tebow. Same thing. He goes to the Patriots. Who do they sign off of? The Carolina Panthers, Cam Newton. So you look at him and you say, the Raiders have Jimmy Garoppolo, who could start a full season and do exactly what the 49ers did with Trey Lance. They could do that with Anthony Richardson. And the coach of the Raiders just so happened to draft, Tim Tebow, and just so happened to sign Cam Newton. I think the Raiders are the team that's going to go with Anthony Richardson. But either way you look at it, two quarterbacks are going. The Raiders go Anthony Richardson. And even if you look at the Colts, like I just said, if you're the Colts especially, and you have Gardner Minshew, and Minshew's a completely capable backup. I have no issues with Gardner Minshew. I don't know if you're specifically the Indianapolis Colts, if you can go a full season starting Anthony Richardson or Gardner Minshew, because you have Anthony Richardson on the bench and you're going to give him that full season. Like I said, like the Chiefs did with Alex Smith, like the 49ers did with Garoppolo and Trey Lance. If you're going to do that, I don't know if Gardner Minshew is the guy that's going to get you through a full season. And you just saw Jim Irsay in week 5 or 6 or something along those lines. He's the one that, bench Matt Ryan, fire the head coach, bring in Jeff Saturday, do this, that, the other. And Chris Ballard is the one that, as a GM, he's on the hot seat and he's losing control because he didn't make any of those decisions. He wasn't the one that benched Matt Ryan. He wasn't the one that fired Reich. He wasn't the one that hired Saturday. You could argue he got some control back because of, what he did. He was able to hire a head coach, and, that he didn't hire Jeff Saturday. But if you're looking at him, you're saying he's going to be on the hot seat. Can he go a full season starting Gardner Minshew at quarterback with Anthony Richardson and all the fans screaming, start Anthony Richardson, start Anthony Richardson. We can't go another game of Gardner Minshew. And they're all screaming that. And Jim Irsay, who's been known to, blow up and be, temperamental and known to be reactionary, is hearing the news, is hearing we got to start Anthony Richardson. And then Anthony Richardson comes in too early, not as early as the plan suggested, and he flounders, and Chris Ballard loses his job over it. It's so easy to see because Irsay he's gonna be ticked off that Minshew isn't winning them enough games in a division that, the Texans, who knows, the Titans, who knows, the Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence are probably going to be running away, and Irsay is going to be sitting here saying, I can't put up with this any longer. We need to see if we have anything in Anthony Richardson. We can't start Gardner Minshew. And if Anthony Richardson isn't ready, Chris Ballard's going to lose his job. And so if I'm Chris Ballard, I think Chris Ballard is going to draft Will Levis from from Kentucky. If you really look at it and you think, he's the oldest one of all these guys. He's like 24 years old. He has the most starts out of all these guys, started for years and years. And, he's up for, in terms of, the Colts, he's got the toughness factor and everything like that. But in terms of, he can start year one for the Indianapolis Colts, and he can make Gardner Minshew the backup, and they can at least figure it out, what they can do. Yeah, the downfall has been there. It, it has been pretty funny, and like I said, I mean, they're in a situation where I don't think that they can draft Anthony Richardson, but I think that they need a quarterback, and so they're in, and they just got jumped by the Carolina Panthers for one. So in my opinion, they have to be all in on Will Levis, or else what the heck are they going to do? Because Will Levis can start next season, and it can at least give Ballard, if he starts rocky, this, that, the other, oh, he's just a rookie, and then he finishes the season strong, it gives you another year in terms of, like I said, I don't know if Chris Ballard keeps his job if Anthony Richardson has to start early because Minshew isn't good enough. So, but either way you look at it and you say, okay, the Texans and the Texans and the Carolina Panthers go Stroud and Young. It's easy to connect the dots for Anthony Richardson to the Raiders. It's easy to connect the dots for Will Levis to the Colts. So you say that's 4 through 7, 4 quarterbacks are going in the top 7 picks. I talked about, you look at the Seattle Seahawks, if they're sitting there at number 5, 4 quarterbacks are gone. They're sitting there saying, Will Anderson, easy slam dunk, obvious pick for us. No doubt about it. So, and I mean, if you're the Chicago Bears, you're sitting there saying that Will Anderson wasn't going to fall to us anyways. When we traded out of number 1, we traded away from Will Anderson no matter what. So 4 quarterbacks are gone. 5 is Will Anderson. Everybody that when you traded out of 1, you did it because you didn't want any quarterbacks and you knew you weren't going to take Will Anderson. So that's going well. Then the next thing you see is, like I said, Carolina or the Detroit Lions and the Arizona Cardinals, for the most part, they're being linked to cornerbacks. The Detroit Lions, I know they added a lot to their secondary, and one of the things that they want to do is be versatile in their secondary. So I'm linking Devin Witherspoon to them very much. And when you think about the Lions in terms of who's their playing style and things like that, Devin Witherspoon plays, he plays like Dan Campbell would if Dan Campbell was a cornerback. And I think, in terms of the tape and everything like that, if they go Devin Witherspoon and then the Cardinals go Christian Gonzalez, and it's similar to just last season when, you have Derek Stingley and Sauce Gardner, or the season prior when you have J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain, in the top 10, when you get those shutdown cornerbacks who can play in multiple zones. And like I said, if you're the Detroit Lions and you have a guy like Devin Witherspoon who can move in and out of the slot, and now Witherspoon can move in and out of the slot, Cam Sutton can move in and out of the slot, Chauncey Gardner can move in and out of the slot. You have a secondaries coach who's known for mixing and matching his guys. So, all right, you link the Detroit Lions to Devin Witherspoon. The Cardinals have already been linked to Christian Gonzalez. Christian Gonzalez may be the best player. You look at the Chicago Bears and you say, okay, we have Jalen Johnson. We just drafted Kindle Vildor, and 2 cornerback sets. Those are our guys. Or we just Kyler Gordon, not Kindle Vildor. But then we have Kindle Vildor. I mean, he's on his last year of a deal. You could potentially upgrade from that. But the other reality is that you saw 2 UDFAs, Josh Blackwell and Jalen Jones. I mean, they did enough last season to where, yeah, you probably add somebody to the mix. But I mean, if you're the Chicago Bears and you're sitting there at 9, you're saying, we aren't drafting a quarterback. We traded out of Will Anderson and no cornerbacks. We aren't going to add a cornerback in the top 10 because we only need a third cornerback anyways. And we have Kindle Vildor, who's potentially better than, some fans think. And I think the Bears coaching staff likes it better anyways. So you look at it and you say, okay, 4 quarterbacks go. Will Anderson goes. Witherspoon, Christian Gonzalez. All of a sudden we're at 8. And you look at them, you look at the Falcons and you say, are they a spot for Bijan Robinson? You look at their offensive line, they basically draft, they kept their right tackle. They have Chris Lindstrom. They could go, they're not going center with, the 8th overall pick. Then they have their other guard, and then they have their tackles Jake Matthews. So, I mean, could they go Peter Skoronski and stick him in at guard? Potentially. But, I mean, they have McGarry and they have Jake Matthews. You look at their defensive line, they just spent a ton in free agency to fix their defensive line, guys like David Onyemata, things like that. So, maybe they go Jalen Carter. But you look in terms of one thing I wrote, and you can check it out at beargoggleson.com, talking about the Falcons being linked to Bijan Robinson. You say they took Kyle Pitts in the top 10, they took Drake London in the top 10, and now they could potentially say, we're going to put Desmond Ridder with a top 10 running back, a top 10 wide receiver, and a top 10 tight end, and a player that when we took this player, pretty much everyone said that this was the best player on the board. And they did it with Kyle Pitts at 4th overall in lieu of taking any of the quarterbacks, Justin Fields, things like that. They passed on J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain. They passed on Penny Sewell, a tackle for Kyle Pitts. So you talk about, do the Falcons, nobody would take a running back in the top 10. The Falcons are not a, positional, ability, things like that. In my opinion, no. I don't think so. I think the Falcons would easily take Bijan Robinson in the top 10, and they proved it by taking Kyle Pitts at 4th overall, that they say if we have a once-in-a-generation talent, the best prospect in his draft, and he just so happens to be a tight end, we're not taking the tackle, and we're not taking the quarterback. We're taking the tight end because we think he's the best. So, if you look at it, why wouldn't they take Bijan Robinson? Like I said, if you look at the Falcons, they have a running quarterback. They were so run heavy last year. They have Tyler Algier, but if they're going to be so run heavy, they needed 2 running backs as it was last season. You look at them and you say, and then you look at Tyler Algier and you say he doesn't catch passes out of the backfield. So you look at it and say, they're a perfect spot for Bijan Robinson. You look at the Chicago Bears and say, if there's one spot they weren't drafted, and I talked about it, it was running back. They added Dante Foreman. They added Khalil Herbert. Ryan Poles just said at the owners' meetings, he said, I love having the 1-2 punch. We did it back in my day with the Chiefs. That's something we preached with the Kansas City Chiefs, was a running back by committee. And he talked about having the power of Foreman, the burst of Herbert, and between them, he can get enough. You look at if the top 8 could go 4 quarterbacks, Bijan Robinson to the Falcons, 2 cornerbacks go, and then Will Anderson, who you already knew wasn't going to be there. If that happens, that, in my opinion, is the best situation for the Chicago Bears. And people are saying, okay, but what if a quarterback is there, this, that, the other? I just don't see a quarterback. I think 4 guys, there's so many needy teams up there. None of them are in on Lamar Jackson, apparently, because they all are going to draft somebody. If you put 2 and 2 together, you say, oh, well, why wouldn't they go for Lamar? Because they're going to draft somebody. So 4 quarterbacks go in the top 8. Will Anderson goes top 8. The Bears weren't going to draft them. 2 cornerbacks, the Bears weren't going to draft them, and Bijan. Bears weren't going to draft any of those guys, and they all go in the top 8, and they sit there at 9. And like I said, now you're sitting here with Paris Johnson didn't go, Broderick Jones didn't go, Peter Skoronski didn't go. You look to the defensive line, Jalen Carter didn't go. That's the big question in the the big skeleton in the closet and things like that. And they brought in Jalen Carter, and you do start to look at some of the teams and you say, okay, the Falcons added defensive line help. Are the Lions a fit? Potentially, or are they going to be, like I said, personality wise, maybe they fit Devin Witherspoon, who, like I said, lives and dies on every snap. Does Jalen Carter have that same passion? But Jalen Carter is going to be sitting there at 9 in most case scenarios. When you get outside the top, 7 picks, he's not going to go there. And like I said, you don't see the Falcons taking him. So Skoronski, Broderick Jones, Paris Johnson, Jalen Carter. In this situation, Tyree Wilson is here. Do you take Tyree Wilson? Lucas Van Ness is here. Miles Murphy is here. This is where Skonks had a comment and said, maybe you just trade down here. Maybe you do. I don't know. Like I said, that's the dream scenario is if a running back goes in the top 9, 4 quarterbacks go, 2 cornerbacks, and you could just sit there and say, well, do we want to take our 3 tech? Do we want to take an edge rusher? Or do we want to take a tackle? And even Jackson Smith and Jigbud, but I think we'll finish it off here with the fact that Ryan Poles talked at the owners' meetings. He talked about how DJ Moore, Chase Claypool, Darnell Mooney, he feels really good about how they all 3 can play off of each other. He said, Mooney's the speed threat. Moore can do a lot of things in the intermediate and with the ball in his hands. He said Claypool can move in and out of the slot. They really like that. I don't see Jackson Smith and Jigba being a fit. But like I said, if you want any of the, maybe Tyree Wilson, Lucas Van Ness, Miles Murphy, if you want any of the tackles, Broderick Jones, Paris Johnson, Peter Skoronski, if you want Jalen Carter, I think there's a good chance, I just named 7 guys, 6, I think there's a great chance 6 of those 7 guys are going to be on the board. So that is going to wrap us up. Like I said, follow me on Twitter at Parker Hurley. Follow us at beargoggleson.com. We'll be back on Thursday, 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central for another half hour of Chicago Bears talk. We'll be doing more draft talk and things of that nature. Like I said, we'll be doing, some outward draft talk. We're not doing just Chicago Bears, but we are going to say how that affects the Chicago Bears. So check us out on Thursday. Like I said, 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central.